Well, welcome to our first Google Hangout. We're live today with Tamara from Crown Point Cabinetry in New Hampshire. We've worked with Crown Point Cabinetry over the last 10 years, and we thought we'd take today and share some of how we collaborate and discuss some different design strategies that we use when we're working with a client. Welcome, Tamara.
Thank you. Glad you included us.
Well, great. I thought maybe the first thing we could do is talk about how when one of the things we like about working with Crown Point is that your design team takes into account the architecture of the building, and for us that's really important because a lot of our buildings, the cabinetry is very integral to the design. It's not like it's a standalone piece. So when we're doing it, often we use cues from our windows and doors to dictate what proportioning we might use in our cabinets. And I thought it might be interesting to hear if that's something you guys do in general, or if that's unique to us, or when you see a plan, how do you guys how do you pick a track for design?
We do also take all that into consideration as well. I always ask people the style of their home if I don't have architect plans in front of me. And I do often like to see even the outside photos of the house, because you want to see the window styles, you want to see the inside, whether or not the archways between the rooms are squared or rounded. You want to play off architectural features with the cabinetry. You want the cabinetry to feel like it's part of the house and not just some cabinets to store dishes in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for us as well. And I mean, I think we've taken it to the level. The cabinets have become so integral to the design of a lot of our houses that we go back to Crown Point for the stains. I can share a photo here in a minute of a project that we worked on together in Bethesda, where basically the client liked the Crown Point sample so much that you guys provided the stain for the rest of the house. And the thing that the piece of this photograph illustrates is really that it's hard to tell where the buildings, where the cabinetry stops and the building starts. So let me go to my screen share for a minute, and we can look at a couple of these photos. So this photograph is for Debbie and Paul in Bethesda, Maryland, and this kitchen is somebody who's come from a much larger kitchen, and they've scaled down. So what we did was, we tried to make an island in this kitchen that where everybody congregated around. This was a little different than the way the client had originally been working in their kitchen, and the original kitchen, when I say the original kitchen, I mean the kitchen in their last house, was definitely less designed, kind of more or less happened, I would say. So Crown Point worked with us in detail on, not just the cabinets, but the layout. Here you can see this is actually a hidden refrigerator, and all the way down to concealing the ventilation in the project. But the key to this photo is you can see the crown molding in this project was not provided by Crown Point or the window trim, but what all the cabinets were, and using their stain and their same kind of sheen on their finish, we tied the two together.
It is a nice example of being able to have us provide cabinetry and have the contractor pull the other elements together to make it look like it literally all came from the same place. I really like the beams in the ceiling and the way the crown molding connects with everything. I think it came out really nice.
Yeah, and this is another one. This is we've had lots of questions about this photograph, and people wondering, thinking that it was all built in, and really the base cabinets were the built-in pieces and the shelves, but all of the rest of it, all of the rest of the trim and the windows and all of that were site built.
Correct. Basically, they provided us with the window size and the trim size they wanted, and we worked within those dimensions for the cabinetry, and just made sure we gave them some scribes so everything fit seamlessly, and all they had to do was connect all the moldings, which was nice.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Tamara. This is the part you were talking about with the beams and the island, and in here there's a lot of different things going on. There's finished carpenters. There's two different finished carpenters in this project plus crown point. So it really does all tie together really nice. I think this is an interesting photo to touch on too, and I'm interested. It seems like a lot of our projects right now where we are doing some configuration of natural wood and either a painted island or kind of the inverse of that. Is that something you guys are seeing as a trend nationally, or is that, or can you kind of tie that down? Are there certain geographic regions that are doing more or less of that?
I'm not sure that it's geographical. We are seeing a lot of that. I think it depends on the size of the kitchen, and a lot of times it depends on the other elements. A lot of times when a client wants to do wood flooring and they want cabinetry with a stain for their kitchen, they want to bring another element in that adds some color or something to break up so much wood. So a painted island is always a nice option, or vice versa, a painted kitchen with a wood stained island. We do a lot of combination kitchens, and a lot of times even maybe a hutch or another area in the kitchen that's a second or third color.
Nice. I really like the way that it separates and makes the cabinets, like in this project, makes the cabinets feel really integral to the architecture, and then the island is more of a furniture piece. And I imagine over time, I mean, I feel like the islands get a lot of abuse, maybe even more so than the cabinets at times. So I think it's nice that that may be able to be refinished on its own at some later point, and not necessarily be tied to having to do something different with the bulk of the stationary cabinets.
That's correct. Depends on the paint finish, but we do offer a few different paint finishes, and some of them can be repainted, so you have the option of just painting over it. Some of them have a finish over the paint, so they can't be, but there are lots of options.
And I don't know for anybody who's watching this that if you haven't seen a crown point kitchen up close, that is definitely one of the defining factors. I really don't think there's anybody that we've worked with on either the East Coast or the West Coast that has the finish down like you guys do. It really does. It really does feel like furniture. It doesn't feel like cabinetry, or And when I say that, I'm like, when you go to Home Depot or you go someplace like that and you look at a basic kitchen, there really is a distinguishing factor in not just the finish of these cabinets, but when you open the doors and you realize like what's going on inside. It does feel like a piece of furniture, which I think that some of the pieces I've read in remodeling magazines recently have put kitchen replacement in like 10 to 15 years as a national average. And I think in a house like this, where somebody's really in it for the long term, obviously budgets is a part of any project, but I think when the kitchen is so much part of the architecture, it's worth the investment in doing I always call it like a furniture grade cabinet install, because it's like you'd have to tear the house apart to get the cabinets out. So I really feel like, and if you don't have to replace them in 10 years, and granted you're going to have maintenance and touch up and finish, but our hope is like with the level of quality that especially the outboard cherry cabinets are in a house like this, they're going to patina and age like furniture, not necessarily like a temporary melamine box cabinet would.
Yeah, I think cherry, especially oak, a lot of those woods that we just put a stain and our baked on finish on, they do last so long. I've been into kitchens that were 20 years old that are crown point, and I'm totally amazed at how beautiful the cabinetry still looks. And the client said that they basically chose the style cabinetry that they chose so that it would be an integral part of their home, and they didn't have to feel like they were doing something trendy that 10 years down the road what they put in isn't fashion anymore. It's not really about fashion, it's about the style of the home and making everything. I mean, the style of the house doesn't change. So making the cabinetry part of that is very important.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think especially in a lot of these houses that are fairly traditionally inspired, and for us, the projects that we've done in Bethesda, Washington D.C., Northern Virginia, a lot of those projects are in established neighborhoods, and this is a new house, but the house really needs to have the bones that it feels like it's been there, and I think that some of them actually feel like they've been there longer than the houses that are actually around them. So it's kind of that bridge where in this project the Rice residence is interesting is that we've had people who say that the inside feels like it's a really nice remodel, which I always feel like is the ultimate compliment.
Yeah, I would say that that is a compliment because it makes it seem like it's an old house that just had good bones and you wanted to just revive it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about trends? What do you guys see happening in terms of cabinets? I'll kind of preface this with as we're designing and we're working through kitchens, and not just kitchens, but other parts of the house, whether it be fireplaces, laundry rooms, any of these more functional pieces. I've laid out a few things that I feel like have really changed our work in the last really over the last 10 years. One has been flat screen television sets. The other has been gas fireplaces, front-loading washer and dryers, and then in the kitchen, I would say that when we get to a market like in the Washington D.C. market, we see appliances like we don't that I don't run into in a lot of our West Coast jobs. Warming drawers, trash compactors, double refrigerators. There seems to be a lot more appliances. So I always feel like some of these have driven design elements, like actually where we place things and how we place them. But I wonder if there's anything that you guys have been running into recently that has changed kind of some of the design approach.
Well, I think that the trend is still to hide some of your appliances, put panels on them, put retractable doors on cabinets to hide microwaves and other things. One thing that I see over and over again is people want an area in their kitchen where they can have charging stations. So they want a drawer near where they come into the kitchen where things can be dropped and hidden behind a retractable door, where they can have outlets for recharging phones and laptops. So that's become more important to people almost. As well as, like I said, just hiding the appliances with matching furniture appliance panels that cover them. As far as trends go, for some reason white kitchens are still what's happening. I know in a lot of your houses that we do a lot of natural wood because that is what people want, that the look of the houses that you do, that's what calls for. And it's just timeless. That's the wood with a stain is very timeless. So the nice thing about pulling in some painted pieces is they can be changed down the road. So paint is still big.
No, that's true in our West Coast projects that we do. Last year we had in Bend, we actually had a couple of houses on the tour of homes, and I did the tour of homes, and I'm going to say that 80% of the kitchens I went to were white painted kitchens, which I thought was interesting. And if they're wood here, they tend to be more alder, not so much cherry. Cherry's kind of that seems in the East Coast we certainly do a lot of cherry projects. It's almost a standard after all this time. I think the other element that I think I find funny in terms of trends right now is iPads or tablets, and kind of the place that how they've crept into the kitchens. I have done somewhere that we've actually done a mount, which is just a hardware mount, but I'm seeing them all the time, in terms of sitting on a kitchen counter with recipes on them, or email, or even as a control center for, I know like Debbie and Paul's house here, actually that they have a small mini iPad that they use to connect all the music and the media, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting. I haven't had somebody request one of those yet, but I'm all over that. I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea. I'm kind of surprised I haven't actually, because people do. I run into people who have one of those on their kitchen counter always, and that's what they get their recipes from. They do their shopping lists on it, so it's how they live, and that's what a kitchen's about. It's about how you live and making it comfortable, so that it's easy to cook in and easy to live in.
Well, I mean, that kind of brings up an interesting point too. It's like we have a lot of times, when you're designing a house, you get to know somebody, you spend a lot of hours, and even before you guys are involved, and and I feel like people have seen just enough home and garden television or bought just enough magazines in the grocery store to have to have some opinions. And a lot of times, I mean, people are very opinionated about kitchens. I'm going to say definitely more than any other part of the house. And to me, it seems like people come with a lot of rules in their mind, like the mystical kitchen triangle, and they feel like what I hear from people is that there's like this rule of how it has to work. And I did a kosher kitchen in San Francisco probably 12 years ago, and that was the first time that I really realized that there was so much going on in this kitchen. There was so much, a whole other layer of redundancy of, how to store things, where to store things. That we kind of threw some of those rules away. But I wonder if how you feel about that. Is there some do's or don'ts or kind of classic mistakes for people to make, or what are the things that if you had to pick a couple of things, what are the really important things in planning a kitchen?
Well, I think the work triangle is still a little important because you don't want to have to walk really far from your refrigerator to your sink and then to your range. So it's still important, but I put less pressure on it than I used to. I usually start the conversation with my customers and asking them to tell me about their project and how they use their kitchen. And I ask them things that they like about their current kitchen and things they don't like about their current kitchen, because I don't want to make anything happen that they don't like. So if they have a situation in their kitchen now that doesn't work for them, I want to know. And it doesn't mean that that situation is a bad situation, it just doesn't work for them. And we always ask how many cooks there are in the kitchen. Does their family all gather in the kitchen when it's cooking time? You want to make sure there's plenty of room for maybe more than one prepping area, if that's the case. And I just try to stay in touch with what the customer wants. And some customers don't know what they want, so we have to steer them a little bit and show them lots of options.
Well, that's interesting too, because I actually find when we're laying them out, there's kind of this sweet spot in terms of size. When a kitchen gets really big, all of a sudden I feel it, and I think this might be just my own internal sense of scale and what I'm comfortable doing, but I find like, excuse me, all of a sudden it can be a refrigerator can just be one too many steps away from the sink, or you have to cross, or you feel like you have to cross. Behind the range every time, and the sink's in front of it. But there's a couple of items like that I always feel like I personally get caught on. After 25 years of doing this, I still find myself going, this is like one step too far. And it's interesting because I had a project that I did up on Bainbridge Island that where I've had the opportunity to stay in the house a couple of times, and it was done as a pretty high-end spec house, and then. Then the builder sold it, and then we became friends with the owners, and they've let us borrow it a couple times. And I noticed it was so much kitchen cabinet. I mean, I felt like I needed one of those like ice Zamboni machines to to clean the counters at the end of it. And but it was like I would say that the refrigerator to the sink was probably 4 solid strides. And I kept finding like to go and get things back. I felt like I wanted a cart. But do you have like a maximum distance you use in your mind, or is it more like just to scale of the kitchen?
I do check distances, but mostly what I pay attention to is kind of in my own mind how far that's going to be, or do they have to walk around anything to get there? I've had people who want to put the range on one side of the island and the refrigerator on the other. And I try to say to them, do you really want to walk around your island every time you want to carry something from one side to the other? And some people don't quite grasp that if they haven't been in a situation where the kitchen didn't work very well. Your instance that you were just talking about, where you stayed in a house where you felt like it was just a little too far away, that's kind of where I was going with about talking to my customers about have they worked in a kitchen that wasn't comfortable and what wasn't comfortable about it. And that way you can kind of work backwards to figure out and help them figure out what works better.
And that's interesting too, because budget always comes up when doing kitchens, and I am definitely a firm believer that a kitchen doesn't have to be huge.
Right.
It's really about how well planned it is, and ergonomically where things are, and that's probably the best way to save some money on a kitchen, in terms of less cabinetry, or appropriate cabinetry. And so I always say that if it's, you can't have a set square footage in mind. I always start with a little bit of like an inventory, like tell me about what you have. Like, are you somebody with a bunch of mixers or a bunch of appliances? And sometimes we can get a lot of that dealt with in a pantry or something, or an appliance pantry or something like that. That's not even necessarily tied to cabinetry. And but then I also ask people to kind of look inside. And I notice that's one of the places that where clients can be surprised by the cost of kitchen cabinets. So, you start having a lot of pullouts, you start having mixer holders, things like that. So I always think it's a pretty good time to take an inventory. If you're going to build a new house, pretty good time to take an inventory of what you're using and what you're not using, and don't make space for things you're not using at the price of cabinets and new construction. Do you guys have a checklist or something like that? Do you have people do a similar thing?
I do. Basically, I do something similar. I ask customers what they have for appliances they need to store, what types of things they leave on their counter versus what types of things they want to store inside the cabinets. We have a lot of different inserts that are available for storing things inside of cabinets. You're right, they do tend to add cost to a kitchen. So if it's something they don't need, I'd rather not add it to the list right away. They kind of have a small checklist of things that I think I automatically add to every kitchen without even asking, which is a double trash, which usually has 2 buckets, one for recycling, one for trash, and then usually some type of corner pullout, because nobody likes to crawl back into the corner of a cabinet. Different types of utensils and silverware dividers. Those are kind of some standards that I will just automatically build into a kitchen. Then from there, we have a great list of all types of inserts on our website and on our catalog. So if somebody sees something like a mixer shelf that maybe they're a baker, maybe they do a lot of baking, and it's important to them to store their mixer where they don't have to get it from the pantry, put it on the counter. They want to just have it accessible. So there's a lot of questions like that do come up. So.
How about multiple heights in kitchens in terms of countertops? That's a question that I get a lot when you've got a husband who's 6'6" and a wife who's 5'2", and the couple of things that I run through with them usually is like, okay, we've got appliances that are a certain height, and we kind of have to work with that. But then there are some places where if it comes to baking, that we can make some variation, or even sinks. I feel like are a pretty big deal. Sometimes a sink can be too deep or it can be too shallow, depending on that. But do you guys, is that seem to be, are people doing much of that? Are you feeling right now multiple counter heights?
Definitely. Anybody that does a lot of baking will often ask for an area with a lower counter where they can roll out dough and use mixing bowls at a more comfortable height. Some of it has to do with the height of the person. And I do quite often, especially when placing range hoods, things like that, I'll ask how tall people are, or if they want their microwave in a cabinet that's above the oven. I'll check to see how tall are you, because I know for myself, I'm slightly vertically challenged, that would be an issue. So I do ask those questions. I actually have had some people who want a taller counter height, and because they and their spouse are both, 6 foot, and it's uncomfortable for them to work at a sink or any other place that is the standard 36. And which is great. We can do that. We can accommodate that because everything we do is custom. The times when we run into an issue with varying your heights of counters is when you have appliances in certain areas, because some of them, obviously, you can't go lower than a standard height if you've got a dishwasher or certain appliances that don't come any shorter. The other thing that is a challenge is making those two counters come together without making them feel like it's an issue, like it's an interruption in the flow. So sometimes we'll do it on one side of an island or at the end of a run of cabinetry where, some people will put like a desk area, and that's usually lower as well. So you just want to take that into consideration about how you're going to make that work and not look awkward.
Nice. It's interesting, talking about the counter heights. One of the things that we've run into this year is, and I think that this picture that we were looking at before with the island with the multiple levels, that used to be really, we really lived and died by that with a 42-inch bar side. I don't know what happened, but it happened probably about 18 months ago, but everybody wants one flat surface right now that I'm dealing with. And it's interesting because I like the way it looks. Feels really nice, but the only downside of it is it does, there seem to be more stools available at 42 that are comfortable. And at 36, I also feel like, and also this photo illustrates pretty well that, you really see everything that's on the counter. So once you've cooked a meal and in an open plan concept, once you've done that, all the pots and pans and dishes and chaos is exposed. But it is interesting. And I've heard it from real estate people a lot right now that are in the speculative market. Like, that's the one thing you can't do. You got to have it all one height counter. And I always find it funny how those trends kind of transition into our daily design routine.
I think that the one height counter is more comfortable for people when they're sitting at the counter because you feel like you have an expansive amount of counter in front of you. When you do a multi-level, you end up with an area that's higher. You need to make that space bigger so that when you're sitting at it, if you are sitting at it with a plate and a glass, you don't want to feel like you're limited on space in front of you so that things are falling off the other side. So I think that's, you get caught up in having enough space to do a multi-level island. You take more space. And so I think that's why people tend to go to that all level, is you can get away with feeling like you have more space when you're sitting at the counter if it's all one level. I do like the multi-level and the fact that you can hide, if the sink is at that space or the range is at the lower space and you've got a great room on the other side, you don't want your guests sitting in the great room looking at the dirty dishes or looking at the pots on the stove. So it's a catch-22, and I think it's very personal preference. I have people who are adamant they want one way or the other. So.
No, I think the part about the island is nice too, and I think that might be a lot of our houses. We've designed an alternative sitting area in the kitchen, with the breakfast nooks, and and I know you guys have done those with us before, and also a lot of other designers. And you guys seem to really have the handle on that, whether it be a built-in breakfast nook or kind of more of a banquette seating. But that seems to be something that I think a lot of people come to us and expect that as part of our design, and it seems to work really well. And the only problem is it does seem to almost, in some cases, it almost negates the need for a dining room. The house that Kristen, my wife, and I built, we actually had one of these built-in banquettes, very similar to the ones I see on your website, and it was interesting. We'd have people would come to the house for dinner and would actually ask to sit there, and we'd be setting the dining room table. They'd be like, "Oh, could we just eat in the nook?" And you sit there, and the first one I did was just a little bit small. It was kind of, I squeezed in there, and my kids were small, I was so young, and I was like, "Let's just be for breakfast, read the coffee, have some coffee, read the paper," and then next thing you know, you got 4 adults wanting to sit in this piece, and I'm like, "Well, why did I build that other 150 square feet for that dining room?"
Yeah, it's cozy. People like booths. You go into restaurants, and restaurants will have tables and some booths, and people are drawn to booths. It's you feel like you can have a comfortable conversation in them, I think is what it is, and kids love them. Kids absolutely love them. So we do a lot of built-ins with banquettes, and they just work well off a kitchen like that. And it's nice to put one near an island because it's almost that's becomes the family gathering in the nook and then at the island if everybody's all together. So
Yeah, on your website, I've seen. I know. It's in your arts and crafts stuff. There's one that you guys did where it's right in between. It's kind of right in front of the island, and I wouldn't have thought of that, but it looks really nice, and I can see how that would serve, especially with young kids, where you don't want they're not ready to be off on their own while you're serving them food. You need to be able to get back and forth to them. Yeah, I think that's a really nice design.
yeah, I know the one you're talking about, and it is. It's comfortable for your children to be there, for you to still be cooking a meal, or maybe you're cooking for company that's coming later, but you're getting dinner ready for the kids too, and everybody's right there. So you have it all in one spot to clean up, and